First, let me give everyone just 30 seconds if you want to just introduce yourself and say what you focus on at your company.
Hello, everyone. My name's EJ Shultz. I'm the Chicago Bureau Chief for Ad Age magazine. Been there for about 7 years. Spent most of my time reporting some of the sectors I've written about, a lot of CPG, automotive, written about insurance. So I focus on more on the marketer side, but I also write a lot about agencies as well.
I'm Chantal Tode. I'm the senior editor for Marketing Dive and Mobile Marketer. They're both part of Industry Dive. Let's see, I oversee the content for both publications. They're digital-only publications, so it's a newsletter and a website. So Marketing Dive, we're focusing, very much on the marketing industry at large, taking the big picture, and Mobile Marketer, as the name would suggest, focuses very much in on the mobile space and how that's transforming marketing.
I'm Frank. I'm the news director for PR Week magazine and MM&M magazine. I'm an adjunct professor in the BIC marketing program at the City College of New York. For PR Week, I write our daily morning breakfast briefing newsletter.
Great, thank you guys. So we've had a lot of, very specific speeches over the course of the day, so I'm really intrigued to get your perspective since it's just so much broader than what we've heard so far. So to start us off, George opened the day really with looking at connecting the dots and how the landscape has gotten so fragmented, and we've certainly seen over the history of advertising where we had the traditional AOR, and that's really broken apart over the years with specialist services and a lot of in-housing. From your perspective, what do you think really serves our clients here in the audience best?
I'll give it a shot. I think you're right. I mean, there's a lot of specialty agencies that have grown up over the last couple decades or so. But I think, what we're hearing a lot and when we're talking to people reporting on is the notion of sort of taking the complexity out. I think you hear Mark Pritchard from P&G talk about that a lot. He doesn't want to have to deal with all these agencies all the time. He doesn't, he just wants a team to come to him with the best work. And along those lines, you're seeing a lot, obviously in recent years, of sort of the big holding company solutions. So you have, I just recently wrote about Volkswagen, starting a global ad agency review, and what they're envisioning is sort of like 5 regions across the world, and to have one hub in each of those regions, and it may not even, it could be one holding company in each hub, but what the CMO told me was maybe the holding company would control like 70% of that account in say North America, and then he'd want the freedom to pick from some independent boutique type agencies for the other 30%. So I guess the bottom line for me is they're just looking for talent, they're looking for good people, and it does sort of raise the question of what the agency brand name means anymore. It does like a Leo Burnett mean what it once did, or are they just looking for a Publicis solution or just literally the best people and they don't care where they're coming from?
So I'm going to reference P&G as well, because they are, I think, visibly struggling and also visibly leading the way here. So they're a great example. But first, let me say that I think, yes, we're definitely seeing a move towards a mixture of maybe some traditional AOR work, as well as some specialty shops and in-house. Some of this is being driven by the need for innovation in terms of where brands are going to allocate how much work and what work goes to each of those. I think that's really going to be very dependent on the segment and the size of the company and the brand's DNA. But like I said, a lot of this is being driven by the need for innovation. Some legacy brands are really facing a lot of competition from some startups that are going direct to consumer, that are really on message for shoppers. So they're innovating the distribution and the marketing, and the brands need to, the bigger brands, the legacy brands, they need to respond. And so it's not just innovating message, it's not just innovating distribution, it's innovating in the marketing structure as well. And so, yeah, P&G is the great example there. They are whittling away the number of agencies they work with. They're innovating, piloting new agency structures, and and some of the money overall, I'm not saying P&G specifically, but overall that's coming out of the agencies is going into in-house and content marketing, as well as social media. And I think brands are seeing some success with that. Where they're not seeing as much success would be taking in-house some of the creative stuff, the creative and the branding. And I think the Pepsi Kendall Jenner protest ad from last year is a really great example of a fail there. So yeah, the brand knows its positioning really well, but it may struggle to translate that into the consumer's sentiment or zeitgeist at that moment. And that's where the traditional agencies are still really standing out above everybody else.
Right. I'm going to go out on a limb here and not reference P&G. So we all, I think the three of us probably spend a lot of time writing about the big accounts for obvious reasons, because they get the most eyeballs. But I think we'd be making a mistake by saying that, you know, what WPP has been able to do with, like, for Ford, you know, as like a global team Ford, is a one-size-fits-all approach for everybody. So one thing that we wrote about recently, and this is just on the communication side, was McDonald's. And they moved away from having one global AOR that handled most of their communications to having specific agencies focus on talking about certain messages. So they have one agency that's talking about how they're changing the quality of their food. They have another agency that's talking about how they do scholarships and how they improve employees' lives and things like that. So that's one trend we're seeing, in that large companies are focusing their agencies on talking about one specific thing instead of trying to be responsive 24/7.
Great. Okay, so we've heard about P&G, Ford, McDonald's. What do you think? Do you think the answer is different when you look at smaller companies or specific industries? Anyone?
I would say, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say it's kind of on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Yeah, I think especially when you're thinking about smaller companies, there's like a zeitgeist question of what do you want your brand to actually be? What do you want it to be identified with, as much as anything else?
Yeah, I mean, if I was running a smaller company, I wouldn't necessarily want to go to the big, well-known agency because I'm going to be, like, you know, last on the ladder. I would want a hungry startup that's trying to make their name off of me.
Perfect. Okay. So thinking about the martech landscape that George showed us earlier, and I won't put it up because I don't want to give everyone a headache, but with 6,700 plus martech companies in the space today, where do you think the agency fits in? Do you think that's part of the agency role? Do you think that's something that clients will start to bring in-house? Do they need martech consultants to put their tech stack together? What's your perspective in that space?
I'll take that. I think managing martech in-house is going to be really challenging. I think that's mostly, or partially at least, about the data and privacy issues. But then again, partnering with somebody third party isn't necessarily going to insulate the brand even anymore, because then there's you know, issues. How transparent is that partner being? How good a grasp do they have on the data and the content that they're getting from their partners? So yeah, the agencies, I think, I think there is some room for an advisory capacity here. I think that's why we're seeing Deloitte and Accenture, for example, do pretty well with their agency business, because they have this sort of legacy, this tradition in operational consultancy. And I think that the direct marketing / performance type agencies also have something to offer here in an advisory capacity, because they have that data know-how. The big holding groups, the traditional agencies, they're definitely dabbling here. We see them trying to do more of this. There's some successes, but I don't see as easy a fit there as for the other ones.
I want to completely avoid the question. So I don't want to make an argument for agency versus in-house, but what I would say about it is one thing that we've covered a lot in the past year and a half is the idea of brand safety and how you have to be careful about where your brand is appearing and where your ads are appearing and where your content is appearing. So just a few months ago, there was a CNN investigation into 300 pretty well-known brands had ads appear on YouTube next to extremist content. And brand safety is a huge topic, and it's a huge headache for brands now. So that's something that I would be careful with.
Yeah, I mean, just piggybacking off of that, we actually at H had our own event yesterday, and one of our speakers was Kristen Lemkow of Chase, and this got a lot of coverage a year ago. How I think they had a brand safety issue, and they realized, you know, they're on some ridiculous number of properties, and they started taking all the ads down, and they ended up, it didn't even change, you know, their ROI, and then they whittled it down to like 12,000 or 5,000. So to your point, I mean, that's definitely something that's being talked about a lot.
If I could just add to one that, has anybody here heard of Sleeping Giants? Which is this very small kind of shadowy nonprofit that if ads for your brand or your company appear on, say, like a Breitbart or any kind of extremist site, they will tweet at you. And they will say, hey, we saw your ad over here. We think you really should consider that. And this happened to us in that there was a PR Week ad because of the programmatic appearing on Breitbart, even though, I mean, we didn't place it there, obviously. And they alerted us to it, and we took it down. So there are these third-party groups that will step in and alert you to these things, even if you're not aware of them.
You guys transitioned to the next question perfectly. So in all of the issues surrounding media transparency and brand safety and everything you guys were just talking about, do you have any advice for our clients in the audience on how to manage their agencies or their vendors or, you know, any of the media companies they're going to make sure they're secure and they don't have those issues crop up?
Pray a lot. It's a matter of trying to be like as omniscient as possible, isn't it? To try to know where everything is at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's just basic human trust, really. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. You know, if you're making the decision to bring stuff in-house versus having an external agency, like, do you trust your agencies? And how do you determine if you trust them, really?
Okay, great.
I think the good news is that on the transparency front, we have seen some gains in the past 12 months to 18 months. Because some of the big brands have been holding Facebook and Google and others more accountable. And that's what brands need to do. They need to hold their partners accountable and demand transparency. Again, the good news is that that's going to get a little bit easier, at least. We are moving towards some more transparency in terms of viewability and metrics. Bad news is that, yeah, the security privacy issue is huge, and I don't think it's going to get any better in the near term. In fact, it's probably going to get a little bit worse.
I don't know. Did you guys see I think it was literally almost 3 years to the day or this week that the whole media rebates issue started. I think it went back to an ANA conference. And then I think it was last week that McKinsey came out with a report that basically said nothing has changed in that 3 years. But then on the other side, you had the 4As saying, oh, wait a minute, a lot has changed. So I don't even know if the industry can agree on if stuff's improving or not, really, at this point.
Interesting. Okay, so we definitely want to hand it over to the audience to ask their questions here in a minute. But before we do that, can you guys each think about, you know, we have a wide range of clients, different sizes, different industries in the room. But for broad strokes in general, can you give everyone kind of 3 pieces of advice going forward into this year's landscape?
Read Ad Age.
That's one. That's one.
I guess one, I'm just going to take one. Maybe then I can think about 2 more when come back to me. I guess don't forget about the big creative idea. I mean, to me, that still matters, even though we get in the weeds and we talk about analytics and measuring and hyper-targeting. I don't think targeting works unless you have a great message, and that's such a simple message. But when I'm writing about stuff, just I guess from a reporter's perspective, if someone comes to me with a great campaign, I'm going to want to write about it. And it's cool, and the idea will spread. And so that really, to me, it's an old school idea, but that really should still guide everything, in my opinion.
I work for 2 magazines, so I can actually one-up you on the please read us thing. Okay, so one thing I would say about this is that 2018 and really for the foreseeable future, absolutely everything is political in one way or another. And you may not think that your brand has any chance whatsoever of it getting caught up in some crazy issue, some hotbed issue, but that's what, you know, the folks at Carrick thought. And, you know, suddenly they don't have a good answer about whether or not they're pulling their ads from Hannity. They go back and forth about it. And they're the subject of these YouTube videos where people are just blowing up their coffee makers, which is a complete waste of money, but I digress. So everything really is political for the foreseeable future. And you should have a crisis plan. You should be ready to respond to things in 2 hours flat if you have to.
Great, thanks.
I would just say to take consumers' evolving expectations seriously. We're definitely hearing a lot about purpose-driven brands and authenticity and transparency from brands. Corey from Twitter talked about this earlier. And I think that's going to be really important going forward, that brands really need to pay attention to that. And it's not going to be an easy thing to do, but I think, you know, it's here to stay.
Great, thank you. Okay, so let's open it up. Does anyone have any questions in the audience? Oh.
My company, as a vendor to Drum, sits in the middle of, as a media company, sits in the middle of the awareness, industry awareness really around a fraud and viewability. And I've been watching almost by accident, but with a lot of interest, the development of ad chain and blockchain technologies as a cure for this. And wanted to see what your opinion is on that. And should I buy or sell my Bitcoins?
I'm not a financial advisor, at least not a certified one anyway, so I really shouldn't step into this question.
The interest in blockchain is huge. I was at South by Southwest in March, and I mean, out of all the sessions that there were, I mean, the blockchain sessions had the longest lines by tenfold. I mean, it was just really impressive. I think that there's definitely some benefits to be gained from blockchain. I'm, you know, skeptical though, having seen, you know, other sort of solutions come along and still somehow get gamed. So I think we're still in the wait and see with blockchain, and I wouldn't put all my eggs in that basket.
Thoughts on the impact of the big consultancies, Deloitte Digital, Accenture, et cetera, getting into the agency space?
Yeah, we at Age we come out with an agency report once a year. We just published our most recent one, and every year, I mean, when you're just measuring them by revenue, they're just really climbing up the ladder. It's funny though, every time I talk to an ad agency that's sort of competing, you know, with a consultancy, they always say, "Oh, that's so overblown." You know, it's like what you guys like to write about. It's really not happening. I think there's a cultural question, obviously, with the consultancies, and you know, who owns Heat? I think it's Deloitte that owns Heat, the creative agency. You know, when they're trying to scoop up the creative agencies, how do you really embed them into a management consultancy culture? So when you're talking about the creative side, but I think they have a great story to tell when it comes to user experiences, and you know, what we were just hearing here, how that's the future. So you know, I think it's a great thing to watch right now, just as a reporter. It's like a great horse race.
Yeah, we've also seen that agencies tend to be very dismissive of the consultancies.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. I mean, and I agree that, you know, Accenture, Deloitte, they're bringing some really interesting and exciting things to the table. Yeah, I mean, and brands seem to be really excited about it. They continue to grow. So yeah, I think we'll have to wait and see.
So there was an earlier speaker that talked about individuals being brands and how players, meaning physical brands or product brands, need to align with human brands. I do agree that celebrity marketing can be pretty powerful, but a lot of our clients are also business to business. And is it appropriate to create a brand out of the business leader who's in the B2B, or how does one, your opinion, make that an effective strategy for a B2B environment?
It's an interesting thought, actually. So if there's someone within an industry that's super respected, not by the outside world, but by within that industry, like, can you take
Who they sell
advantage?
to?
Yeah, I mean, that seems, I don't see how it would be any different than on the consumer side. I mean, if it would work on the consumer side, if you had like a respected personality, that's a great personality, I would say use it.
I can give it a shot. I mean, we get pitched some really awkward partnerships sometimes. You know, whether it's a company that doesn't seem to have any fit whatsoever with a certain YouTube influencer, and you're just like, I just don't get it. But you would think that as long as it's a fit for the audience, it will work. But I think it goes back to like the old journalism rule of you have to know who your audience is and what they want.
Great. Any other questions? All right. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.